Hello, everyone, and good day to all of us joining in this webinar. So today we're going to talk about quite a controversial topic about paper tigers and how the compliance plays a role in that. So my name is Krete Paal. I'm the CEO of GDPR Register, an Estonian privacy startup built for organizations who take privacy very seriously. And that tension between compliance that looks good and actually works is the topic that we're going to talk about today. And I think we've all seen it before. Policies are written, registers are maintained, people are doing assessments, governance materials, and on paper it looks very, very nice and shiny. But when things happen, for example, an incident, a regulatory inquiry, an audit, suddenly it all comes crumbling down as a paper house. So today's session is about this gap, and more importantly, how to close it. Today with me, I'm so happy to have Ralph O'Brien, and maybe Ralph, you can also introduce yourself to the audience.
No problem. Well, thank you very much first for inviting me, Krete. Much appreciated. So yeah, my name's Ralph O'Brien, and I've been trying to protect people in the uses of their data for over a quarter of a century now. I like to say that I'm older than I look, but I'll let you be the judge of that. Yeah, I started in the late 90s, and I'm one of the few people working in UK data protection who's old enough to remember the tail end of the 1984 Act. Let alone the 98 Act or you know the 2018 Act. And it's been my pleasure and privilege to work for organisations large and small across the globe, trying to help them to get all the excellent benefits out of technology and hopefully none of the harms.
And why I value, Ralph, your perspective is your approach to privacy from a practical standpoint, and building things that actually work and are built inside the business, and how the management approaches it, and also how to prevent real harm to real people. So that's why we are all here as well. How to protect the people in the end of the chain. And I think this is like the conversation that really has like a practical value, and that's the discussion we're going to have today. It's not about theory or any different clauses from the regulations. It's about real people doing real things and making things matter and work.
Yep.
So Ralph, you've done a lot of privacy work throughout your quarter of this time, so 25 years. And was there a moment or a pattern you kept seeing throughout your projects where you realized that organizations could have everything in place on paper and still be fundamentally exposed? Can you give us some examples?
Well, I don't think there's a specific moment, but a lot of the work I've been doing has been with the Institute of Operational Privacy by Design in the US in Florida. And I'm really a big fan of the original Anne Kavukian data protection and privacy by design principles. Those 7 principles really changed the way I look at data protection. I used to be a bit of an evangelist. I used to be one of these people who used to walk around saying, no, you can't do that. And you just got to stop that. And no, you'll hurt people. And that's all very well and good, but that doesn't win you any friends. And I think sometimes in data protection, we can be very much perceived as the blocker, very much perceived as the people who are there who say, no, slow down, you can't do that. And I really wanted to change that to becoming more of a builder. And what I've really noticed is whilst we're very good in the data protection profession, especially in sort of legal and compliance aspects in delivering documentation, what interests me is what does the documents do? How do we change the conversation from, instead of like, oh, we brought this new system, do a DPA on it, put the tick in the box, to how do we actually help people? How do we protect people? What are we doing as data protection professionals that delivers real effect for people? And it's that kind of practical advice, that kind of practical guidance, normally means getting in a lot earlier. And so over the years, I've kind of noticed a lot of documentation that sits on the shelf, but doesn't actually do a lot. And I think that's what I'm really seeking to change.
Absolutely. And then to our audience, along the way, feel free to pop your questions into the chat. We will definitely cover them along the way. So that's the point, for you to get engaged and jump in as well. And Annelies and Lauren, like people I've already met in a video call from previous times, from South Africa, joining us. So lovely to have you here as well. So when you looked at like different documentation, because I think a lot of people and the common misconception is that privacy and data protection is about the documents you produce. And one big massive document can also be the data protection impact assessments. Like, in your experience, how often does a DPIA actually change the outcome? How often does it shape the decision rather than just document what has already been made? Is there like a real impact it can have?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a lot of compliance, what I call compliance burden on organizations. The GDPR is now 10 years old, the 27th of April, 2016, 10 years of GDPR now. And one of the biggest changes in the GDPR that everybody looked at was accountability, right? This idea, show your homework, demonstrate compliance, as it says in the law. Accountability, Article 5.2, Article 24, they all kind of say, show you're working. And that's a great thing, because what organizations were really concerned about was regulatory penalty. So if we've got a load of documents we can show the regulator, that'll give us a level of defensibility. Okay. And what happened over the years was the means kind of became the end. So why is there a DPIA? Well, it's before you do something, looking at the risks to individuals and having a result of the technical and organizational measures to protect them. Well, somewhere along the line, that the goal stopped being come up with the technical and organizational measures to protect people and have a DPIA. So that was a bit of a change, and it kind of happened slowly, subconsciously, with organizations thinking, well, how do I prove I comply with the law, rather than how do I do things that will affect the data subjects?
Yes.
I'll give you a good example. For example, you talk about global technologies, you talked about things like big tech providers. So when, for example, a company, and I'm just going to use an example here, other vendors are available, of Apple. Apple will go, okay, let's design a new product feature where if you press a button, people can no longer track you. That is going to have more effect designing something into the technology to help people than all the DPIAs in the world. So if we actually design things into the product early, rather than doing paper-based DPIAs to rubber stamp later, we're going to all be in a much better place. We're going to design good things that help people rather than trying to put the brakes on afterwards. So the time of intervention, I think, must be the biggest change. Proactive design rather than reactive compliance documentation.
How often have you seen that people actually write tasks and improvements in the end of the DPIA document and assign the responsible person, it actually gets done? Have you seen it?
Sadly, rarely. And I'm going to point out a couple of examples here, which I probably shouldn't say too badly, but like during the COVID, for example, the NHS here in the UK, they designed an app that went out there that enabled us to look at COVID vaccinations and prove that we've been vaccinated and all that good stuff. But when we went and looked at the DPIA for it, it had clearly been written after the fact to tell us all the good things that have been done than done before the fact to help them as a design tool. And I think what I do see, and I see it a lot, as I said, the goal has become doing the DPIA, not coming up with controls to protect people. So I see a huge amount of DPIAs that have pages and pages and pages of
the longer the better.
Yeah, and they've spent all this time and they've talked to all these people and they've written down what they're doing. And then when we get to the end, the final page, which says, oh, and these are the actions we're going to take, there's almost nothing there. And I'm like, well, what have you done? You've just wasted everybody's time. You've wasted your time. You've wasted everybody else's time. You've spent all this time producing a document that doesn't actually do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a number of reasons for that. One is that generally data protection teams are pulled in too late. People try and avoid them because they think they're going to say no or they're going to cause trouble. And because we don't add things, we're seen as someone who takes away. We stop people from doing something. We're going to say no. We're going to introduce barriers. And actually, I think the more we can become a designer and the more we can come up with good ideas to help people, the more we'll be included in conversations later.
Absolutely. And Lauren also mentioned growing the risk register, but not actually addressing the data issues. So yeah, and I think it comes back to the topic that privacy is approached like one piece, a separate but not part of a business, how it supports it, how it can actually leverage and manage the risks for the business as well. So what's your approach on the risk lists and risk registers that you've seen, also part of the DPAs and separate as well?
Well, actually, one of my biggest tips I tell people to stop using the word privacy at all. If you actually read the GDPR, it doesn't use that word. It never uses the word privacy in the GDPR. What it says is protect the rights and freedoms of natural people when processing their data. When we start to use the word privacy, which is, I know it's an Americanism and we use it every day, we kind of use it as a shorthand for data protection. We have to remember it's not the data we're protecting, it's the people.
It's the people, yeah.
Yeah, and so actually by using the word privacy, as soon as someone hears the word privacy, they think stop, or I can't do that, or it's got to be this versus this. I don't think about data protection as something that takes away or stops. I think of it as adding
business
functionality. Yeah, if we can add features and functionality. I mean, I'll give you a good example. Subject access requests. If we design technology whereby an individual can log in, press a button and download their data, better for the individual.
Yeah.
Better for the data protection teams who don't have to spend the time, going through and doing all of that stuff. And as soon as someone says it, you say, yeah, log in, press a button, done. And that's not going to work everywhere. But if you design those product features into your tools, and there shouldn't be a DPAA that doesn't talk about how do we automate rights requests, right? So the fact we're still doing things manually, the fact we're still doing things in a digital world through paper-based compliance systems, that's a real travesty. And I think we're going to look at ourselves. We've got to look at ourselves. We've got to change the way we're talking to people. Because as soon as we start using the word privacy, as soon as we start saying, immediately someone's like, okay, they're going to stop us. They're going to stop us. They're going to get in the way. They're going to be my barrier here. And so I say, well, no, data protection, it's not just about privacy. It's about protecting all our fundamental rights and freedoms from harm. It could be discrimination. It could be the wrong data that leads to your wrong leg being chopped off. Real story. And so, that's not a privacy issue. That's the wrong data hurts somebody. And so to me, actually, whilst the Americans use the word privacy and it's kind of become endemic in our culture, going back to some of the fundamental principles, which is we're there to reduce the risk of harm to people's rights and freedoms, is going to make us much more effective than people thinking we're there to get in the way and stop them.
And I think it when you look at this, like the culture around privacy versus data protection, also different historical things that have happened, like the US versus Europe and how they approach data. Like is it like protection, or is it just a goal to earn money and monetize this as an asset? So I think it also plays a big role how the company culture around this topic is is handled, and it's really hard to break this narrative and how to actually demonstrate that it has value for the business, because that's what they are looking for as well.
There's some real perverse incentives out there. Yes, I totally agree. Businesses exist to make money, and that might mean that they want to do that at the expense of individuals. That's more of a moral or an ethical question. My wonderful partner always says when she gives advice, she gives three answers. She gives the legal answer, she gives the operational answer, and she gives the ethical and moral answer. Choose who you want to be, which lane do you want to be in, ethical, moral, or operational, or legal, right? There are things that we do that are illegal because we're happy to accept the risk. There are things that we do that's immoral because we're in chase of profit. So who do you want to be? But I don't think it's a versus conversation. I don't think it's we can protect people or make profit. I think you can do both. I think it's not a zero-sum game. It's not a zero-sum game. It can be a positive-sum game where it's like designing a car. Okay, if I want a car that's going to go faster, okay, I cannot make a car that goes faster unless I put in better brakes, right?
Absolutely, safety measures. Yeah.
But that's something you add to the car. It's not something you take away. You're not saying don't build the fast car. You're saying yes, we want the car to go faster. That's
you want to survive in the end as well. Yeah.
But just don't kill people while you're doing it. So perhaps think about data protection instead of a legal compliance issue, almost like a product safety issue. Right? Yeah. In fact, we're seeing that with AI. Looking at the AI Act, the way the EU has kind of tried to treat AI is not so much as a sort of a legal compliance or a fundamental rights issue, but like if you're going to create a product in a way that doesn't harm people. And I actually quite like that this idea of a sort of a product safety issue, because a lot of data use is technology, global technology at that. I'm really pleased to see people from South Africa and sort of wider here, because the technology is global, and we've got all of these little countries saying do it our way, do it the way our law says. But actually, if you're going to build technology globally for humans, you've got to think about how those humans can be hurt and, hopefully present a product in a way that does the right thing for the right people. Lauren's just said you can build a car without brakes, but it won't be approved for use on the road. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. So but sadly, you don't need a badge or approval to produce a new tech system, generally speaking. So there we go.
Yeah. And I think one topic that is not enough talked about is the legal design side and privacy engineering, and it's like how to, and actually what we see from the EU level as well is like more about like how this privacy designing becomes like this thought that you think like before, and how to make it work, and how the user interface should be like, and how the end users understand things, how it is worded, how the journey will be. And do you think this is like something that we should all be preparing for, like the design aspect, that we're not just reading the law, we are also designing processes, and how to upskill in that word?
Yeah, the future for me is very much in almost software engineering. You go to the US, they have this concept called a privacy engineer that is, a software designer who understands data protection. And you can earn a lot of money in California being a privacy engineer. Let's put it that way. I think the sad thing is that a lot of businesses aren't designing, they're just consuming. And I'm starting to see this a lot more, in things like software as a service tools. We don't create anymore. We don't think, oh, okay, let's host it ourselves, let's do it ourselves, let's do it our own way. We just sign up to something, right? And that means you've lost control. You've lost control to that environment, and they're not interested, as a large software as a service company in almost what you do. They're just like, we're going to provide this service and all the liabilities on you, and you just pay us money to get stuff, right? And that's created some problems, in that we stop critically thinking. In fact, that's another problem with AI. You tend to accept the outputs and don't critically think about it. Because thinking time for organizations is not rewarded. If you're sitting there going out the window thinking about something, As far as the organization is concerned, that's downtime. That's stuff you're not rewarded for. That doesn't look productive. It doesn't look like you're creating anything. Whereas actually, sometimes that space to think, that space to talk and engage with people and understand how they can be harmed, and taking the extra time to design and create something with humans at the heart can really bring dividends in the long term. But we're not incentivized for that. As humans, it's like, let's get on, let's move, let's build AI, let's adopt AI, let's throw new technology in the place. We're so worried about whether we can do something, we never really stop to think whether we should. That's a Jurassic Park quote. And so there's all these perverse incentives out there. Get on, do it faster, make it happen. We bought this, now do the certification, rather than thinking about things before you do it. And unfortunately, these are the things that will lead to harms. Great power. We've got the technologically power of the gods now, but none of the responsibility or none of the work to get it. And therefore, as Spider-Man says, with great power comes great responsibility. And if we're not taking that responsibility,
and seeing that like how I have framed it is like this high-speed train like of AI, and everyone wants to get on it, but we don't know the destination, we don't know the guardrails, how are the brakes, like how's the journey gonna be.
Building the track as the train goes.
And we don't know if we have enough gas or coal, but everyone wants to get on it. And that's what Lauren also mentioned, the vibe coding craziness that has exploded, but everyone is building interfaces, platforms, apps, but they don't necessarily understand the practical requirements that would be required for data protection. And I totally agree with that. So, and AI still doesn't know the context. It doesn't understand the business. It doesn't understand where the risks are, what is the approach towards the risks.
It doesn't understand or think at all. We tend to use these words, don't we? We tend to say, the AI hallucinated, or the AI thought, or the AI understood. Actually, what people forget, because it talks in a convincing human language now, is you're just dealing with a statistical engine, right? You're dealing with a statistical engine that's trained on some data that tokenizes your words, goes out, searches, and produces a tokenized response based on a statistical algorithm. It doesn't think or understand anything. It just operates within the guardrails it's been given. We need to return to the documents. There are an awful lot of documents that are required for a successful data protection program. It just needs to scale. Smaller organizations will need less. But you look at a larger organization, you're going to have DPAs on high-risk systems, you're going to have some sort of data inventory, you might have a roper on top of your data inventory, you're going to have policies, procedures, you're going to have contracts, you're going to have design documentation, you're going to have to prove that you've done it, you're going to have records of rights requests, you're going to have records of security stuff. Documents and records are going to be everywhere. So please don't think that I'm saying we don't need to have documentation. We do. But I think the most important thing for me is making the documentation do something rather than just keeping the records. Because otherwise, we're spending a lot of time and effort spinning the wheels without actually achieving anything. And that requires cultural change, which is the hardest thing to affect in any organization.
Yeah. And there is a question for Birgit. It also circles back to my questions about the leadership buy-in and privacy. People, we know like what needs to change, but we can't get the business to take it seriously. And what's the most effective framing for making the case that this is a business issue, not just a compliance obligation?
Yeah, it is difficult. I have noticed a huge change here, especially in the UK. In fact, I think Birgit has just put in the comments, fines for non-incident GDPR violations are rare. That's a really interesting point. In the UK, our information commissioner, doesn't issue fines and penalties. When the GDPR came in, the reason why a lot of people got on board of it is because people were worried of fear of penalty. People were worried about compliance failures that will lead to penalty. In fact, that's no real way to convince anyone of anything, because number one, if those fines don't, number one, those fines may not materialize. And then you're left saying, well, you blackmailed me. You came to me and you said bad things.
Mongering, like, and blowing things out of proportion.
Total fear-mongering, total blowing things out of proportion. And what happened is, management can now go, well, you lied to me. Or even worse, they've done it with one hand tied behind the back, going, well, my motivation for doing this is so that, I don't get hurt. And that's no way of doing anything. Like, you don't want to go into it begrudgingly, or else bad things happen to you. So I'm more of a fan of the carrot approach. Say, look, if you do this, good things will happen, right? Less data means that you'll save costs. More accurate data means you'll make better business decision making. The principles will save you in every occasion. Secureness will lead to customer trust. Transparency will lead to customer trust, giving people options and controls. I did a very interesting experiment with a marketing team the other day. The marketing team had this wording that said, click here to consent for direct marketing. And nobody was clicking because I don't want marketing. And I actually said to them, well, what does direct marketing mean? They said, what if I click on direct marketing, does that mean I've got an email every second? A phone call every minute? What does that even mean? And I said, well, why don't you give them control? Why don't you give them options? So instead of saying yes or no for direct marketing, say, would you be happy with an email a month on these topics, or a call every 3 weeks on this topic? And we actually found, by giving people more control, by almost, instead of an opt-in or out, almost like an opt-down, by giving people more control, and more people said yes. More people said, yeah, actually, I'm happy with an email a month, right? Whereas if you just say direct marketing, people go, oh, no. But when you tell people what's going on, when you give them transparency and control, all of a sudden people have a level of trust and are more happy to engage with you.
Absolutely.
It's about the carrot. It's, if we just look at fear of fines and the stick, which is why a lot of people looked at data protection in the first place, the more you can be able to sell the benefit, the more you can add product features rather than take them away, the more of a benefit the organization will feel you are. The problem comes when you're seen as the person running around trying to stop everything, and then no one wants to talk to you. You get involved late, and then you can't do anything. So we need to be builders, not blockers.
Absolutely, and I've said for so many times before that the biggest currency these days is trust. How do you actually demonstrate trust to your clients, to your partners, to the regulators, to the general public? And we're moving towards this huge revolution of AI when the old age hasn't ended and the new one hasn't begun. We're in this fast shifting times of uncertainty, and I think the companies who can demonstrate reliability, transparency, and trust will be the winners of the long run globally, not just Europe.
Yeah, I mean, putting humans at the heart. I mean, in a way, corporations are thoroughly parasitic. Corporations are given their own legal entity and exist to further the legal entity. But actually, we're a society made up of humans, right? And therefore, and thankfully, what I'm seeing is actually I'm seeing a lot of organizations putting data protection in with more things like social and ethical and corporate responsibility. This idea of actually saying, we want to be good corporate citizens. We want to do things for the future of humanity. We want to put the human at the heart of what we do. Burgett actually wrote in their comment there, if the company is formally seen as compliant on paper and risks seem low. Yeah, I actually did a blog post recently, and I finished it by saying, the person who's been harmed will be very comforted to know that it was in a fully documented, compliant manner.
Happy for the paper.
Exactly. So this is why we're talking about the paper tiger. It might feel like you're, I've got a contract in place. Yes. What are they doing as a result of that contract? Your lawyers have spent hours and hours redlining the contract, saying, right, we're going to enter in a contract, we're going to redline it, and now you're going to do this, and I'm going to do this. And I often say, great, the contract's in place, now what's happened? They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, we've got the contract. And I'm like, yeah, but what's happened because of the contract? International transfers. We put in an SCC. Great. What are they doing differently? You know,
yeah, absolutely. And one thing is like, but it's really hard to measure something that you can't touch or see physically. So how to put in place some metrics, how to measure privacy, what does like effective privacy program actually looks from a measurement perspective? How have you done it in your career?
Yeah, so metrics and measurements are interesting. I'm a big fan of management systems. I've done a lot of work in the ISO 27001 world, and metrics and measurements are always fascinating to me. And funny enough, I do a lot of data protection training courses. Hey, what do your management ask you? They say, what do you mean? I say, well, your management are investing time and money in you. You know, you are paid for what you do. And I say, so what return are you giving them? And they say, what do you mean by that? And I say, well, what's your management ask you? How do you know that you're successful? And people say, oh, we haven't got a fine. And I'm like, well, it's difficult to prove the absence of something. Like, if you weren't there, would you have got a fine or not? You know, it's like saying no unicorns have breached my defenses this year. You know,
like you do like all day, like.
So stop talking about what hasn't happened and start talking about what we've done. Okay, in terms of metrics and measurements, I think we're better off saying to the management, right, what do I want my program to do this year, my data protection program? What do I want to achieve? I can't do everything. I can't boil the ocean. I've only got a certain amount of resources. So year one, I want to complete a data inventory. Year two, I want to look at contracts. Year three, you know, I want to make sure that, you know, I've got a new procurement process or whatever. So I think, you know, we can talk about the number of subject access requests. We can talk about how quickly we met them or what the quality was. We can talk about reductions in complaints. We can talk about the amount of data. There are no right and wrong answers to what you measure. But to me, what's important is instead of starting to talk about the absence of things, starting to talk about all the great things you have done. These are the product features we've added. These are the complaints we've gotten rid of or reduced. You know, because compliance paperwork, as we've said, is great. You know, it's useful to kind of show stuff. But how has that changed behavior? You know, whenever I do a training course, I say, look, you're going to be asked to evaluate the training course. You're going to get a survey that says, did you like Ralph and what he taught you, yes or no? I said, but that almost doesn't matter to me whether you like the training course. What matters to me is what are you going to do differently tomorrow? You know, yes, you might want the badge or the qualification, but what behaviors are going to change? How are things going to evolve? What are you going to do differently? So I always say on my training courses, the last thing I always say is write down 3 or 4 things. Just say, look, I'm going to do this differently tomorrow. I'm going to adopt this approach. I'm going to do this. So metrics and measurements are great, but they've got to be in support of things that happen, things that matter. And we are so blessed in the data protection world to be able to influence things that matter. You spend your time doing something that matters. If you write a DPIA and spend hours and hours and hours on it and it doesn't do anything, you've wasted your time, right? So let's do things that matter and move the needle for people.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one thing that I have asked my friends who work in tech companies, and I asked them, like, what is your relationship with your in-house data protection officer or privacy counsel? And they say, like, who and what and who is this person? They don't know. And I think it's a matter of like doing like a good job, like compliance wise, but also it's a marketing project. You have to market yourself. You have to market the field. You have to make it like fun. You have to have it like engaging. You have to be like an approachable person, and you have to put your face into like different like projects and go to product meetings, go to all hands meetings, go to management, go to like deep down all the levels and departments and show who you are as a person as well.
I totally agree. We have a huge reputational problem as an industry. We have a problem that people look at us as people to be avoided because we're going to slow them down and stop them.
Yes, and they're hiding things from you as well because they thought you will shut them down.
Exactly. So they don't want to engage with us, or they get in late. So we've got to prove ourselves as people who can be useful. We've got to prove ourselves as people that add value to them rather than take it away. At the moment, oh my God, the data protection person's coming. He's gonna make me want to write down a load of stuff and do a load of assessments that is going to take away from my actual work. So we need to prove that we're additive. We need to prove, once you've done a couple of DPIAs, you should have some solutions in your pocket. I call it like a data protection playbook. It's like, once I've done it a few times, and these are all the great ideas we've come up with, we can then reuse that and utilize that and kind of go, hey, I did this project the other day and we did this cool thing and that could really work on this project. So, you kind of come up with these solutions. We great problem people. We need to be solution people. And that's how we're going to move the needle. I totally agree with what you're saying, as part of our own rebranding, we need to identify the right intervention points. You mentioned new projects. New vendor onboarding, new IT systems being procured. We've got to be much more effective in the planning phase than we are later. A friend of mine describes software development like pouring concrete. He says, when you're pouring concrete, you can mold it into whatever mold you like. But once the concrete sets, you try bolting 2 bits of concrete together, right?
Yeah.
It just doesn't work. And so we're going to be so much more effective in the design phase, coming up with helpful solutions and adding value rather than trying to take things away much later in the process.
And I think it also reshapes, because usually privacy councils and DPOs tend to have a legal background or IT background, and they're considered okay, you read the law and you read the instructions or certifications and standards and you do this thing. But I think it's so much more. It is creative work. It has so much creativity, and I think this is also what I would like to inject to the audience and also people who listen to this recording later on, that don't be afraid to get creative and find ways how to develop the creativeness in you. And it has nothing to do with the law. It's about the human approach. It's about finding different angles and ways to lead management, lead change, change people's minds, psychology aspect.
Well, change your own mind first. I want to challenge some of the lawyers, actually. Some of my friends are lawyers and some of the greatest data protection people I know are lawyers. However, some of the rise of lawyers in data protection has led us to an interesting place. As I said, it's great to have a contract, but what does it do, right? Things like data protection notices, people laughably call them privacy notices, which is odd because they don't describe how you're going to keep anything private. They actually describe what you're taking and using. In a way, they're actually privacy invasion notices. But as soon as you get a lawyer involved, they write them as if they're a contract, and you lose the transparency, you lose the human element. They get written as if they're for, some sort of legal contract with a data subject, rather than just saying, hey, this is what we're doing, and this is what we're taking, and this is what you'll get as a return. Going back to it more as a product safety feature, I actually quite like saying to people, actually your privacy isn't important to us. It's not about privacy. It's about saying, if you want something, you got to give us something, right? If you want this webinar, you've got to register, and we're going to need data in order to do that. If you want to get on a train and buy tickets, I'm going to need your card number for you to pay with it, right? This is not rocket science. It's so stop saying your privacy is very important to us and start saying, look, you give us this, you get this, but don't worry, we'll take care of it, right? And I think companies like Meta and Facebook would do a lot better. Instead of saying your privacy is important to us in long legal rambling documents, they started to say, look, we got to monetize the hell out of your data, but in return, you get this kick-ass social media platform. Deal? Isn't that more honest?
And I think that's what we are missing, because when you look at some of like a big tech terms, privacy policies, even I don't sometimes understand like what exactly are you doing with my data. It is so vague, and especially when AI is put to work as well. And as Lauren is saying that. But it is marketing the benefits of being there from the start that can be a challenge, especially after being seen as a cost rather than a business blocker. So yeah.
No, I totally agree with what Lauren's saying there. You know, marketing your benefit, being better at self-promotion, getting in early. We have to find new and innovative ways to educate people. In fact, we were talking just before this that one of the things I'm trying to do at the moment is build a board game. Now, this is shameless self-promotion.
Yeah.
But you know, it's shameless self-promotion. Prototype phase, can't buy it yet. Should say, but I'm being more open about the fact that it's going to be out there very soon, and it's just a new way to kind of get into people's head. You know, gamification, education, understanding that the board game that I'm presenting is about getting all the benefits out of technology, but trying to reduce the harms, which is ultimately I say game. It's not a game. It really affects people, but that's ultimately the world we're in, right? Where it's not a case of saying, oh, we're not going to do AI. Of course, the world's going to do AI. It's a new technology. They're going to embrace it, but let's embrace it in such a way that we take our time to think about the implementation, so that we don't cause those unintended harms. I don't think anyone really wants to hurt groups of people. That's perhaps my positive head saying there. I can actually hear people going, well, there are people who do, but no, but generally speaking, the problem with some of these new systems like AI is they're built for the majority. You've got this like normal distribution curve where your average normal person's in the middle, and it's built for that statistical probability. The problem then becomes the edge cases, the people in the tails, the people who it wasn't built for, the people who will be disproportionately disadvantaged because they are, I hate to use the term not normal, but do you know what I mean? Not statistically average, right? If you happen to be LGBT or a different race or ethnicity, or have a disability or something that doesn't fit into the standard model that's built for, you're going to be affected disproportionately, especially as we move into the more statistical models of AI. And so consulting, talking to people, building things that include a range of stakeholders. Again, this will move you away from being that paper tiger that we've talked about into producing controls that are built for real people.
Absolutely. And one like practical tip or how I have like conducted trainings is actually, I had this like a huge collection of privacy memes. It was my thing. Every time I saw something funny or educational, I put them in a folder. When I did a training, I did training all about memes to show that each case is like this. And then we were laughing and we were analyzing it. People were so engaged that even people from, I don't know, IT department, marketing, where everyone was like clapping. It was so fun. And that's what made more fun in life.
Who wants to read a DPA? Who wants to read a long T's and C's and contracts and a privacy notice? I'm a big fan of videos. Like, replace your privacy notice with a short video or a cartoon or a comic book. Something people like. You talk about memes. So I saw one great the other day. It was like a girl standing against a wall and another girl with like a tuba, a big musical instrument, over her face. And the caption was, companies with AI, like you're being blasted with wherever you go. You don't have choices.
And people don't like to read policies either.
So produce a video, make it humorous. If you are going to produce documentation, make it something that people delight in looking and reading. These are sometimes seen as barriers to entry. We're all a generation of liars, because every time we go onto something, we're asked to click accept or click that you've read the terms and conditions, and we're signing up to these legal agreements that we haven't read, because A, we don't have the time. B, we just want access to the service. C, they make it really hard to understand.
Mhm.
So we're a generation of liars. We click accept everywhere we go for stuff we haven't even read and looked at. I mean, there was a very famous one. It was a computer games company. I forget which one, but they wrote in their like T's and C's, like, you will give us the soul of your firstborn child.
Yep.
And nobody, like, everyone just like tick, tick, tick. And nobody read it, right? I mean, it was hidden far down, but the point was that, you know, the people were signing up into these things they don't understand. So how do we make them accessible? How do we make them usable? How do we have fun? If you get a chance, anyone who's watching this, you know, go onto the Lego website and find their Captain Safety video. They've got a video for kids called Captain Safety about the use of the internet. It's a brilliant little animation. It's a brilliant little animation, and it very simply tells aimed at the right audience, the kid who's watching, you know, some really difficult concepts, but really in a fun and interesting and animated way. If I tell my kids, like, you know, go and research the Second World War, they're not going to wander off to the library and read a book. They're going to watch a YouTube video.
Yeah, and people also consume information in different ways. Some people like to hear, some like to read, some want to just be visually something is there, like, and I think it's like how you cater. Actually, you can't like put the message out in one way. It has to be different ways. Like people will get and absorb, and it's like how you communicate to different personality types as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've learned throughout the years that, you know, even though I might look a certain way, you know, my personality type is a little bit, you know, out there. I found out that I'm neurodivergent at a very old age, and actually, you know, it sort of explained what had gone on through the rest of my life. You know, my superpower is that I can talk about data protection for hours and hours and hours after everybody has lost interest and gone to sleep. Not much of a superpower. It's the only one I have. But different people need to be addressed in different ways. One size fits all is a problem. My 93-year-old grandmother tried to get an appointment at the doctor's surgery the other day, and she had to sit through ages of, do it online. Why haven't you done it online? Do it via the app. Why haven't you done it online? She's like, I don't have a computer. I don't have a smartphone. And she gets through to the actual receptionist after a long time of waiting, and the receptionist's like, why haven't you used the app? Why haven't you typed in your details? I can't triage you without you filling in a form online. And the receptionist actually had to do it on her behalf, like pretending to be my grandmother, because the receptionist wasn't even empowered to do anything before filling in an online form. So you've got this sort of digital exclusion going on. You know, I went to park the other day, and you know, I was parking and I had to use the app, and I was like, well, how does someone cope who's kind of park who doesn't have an app or doesn't have a phone? You know, so digital exclusion is a thing, and you know, this is another good thing about paperwork. You know, going back to our topic, when I'm doing a DPAA, I have to think about the risk of harms to people. Now, when I look at myself in the mirror, what do I know about the risk of harms to others? I'm a, I'm a white guy of a certain age, which means I don't have the lived experience to know what it's like to be a female, to be from a different ethnicity, to be transgender, someone who's, you know, mobility impaired. You know, I don't have that lived experience. So without talking to a range of stakeholders, you know, your DPAA is not going to, you know, how dare we think that we can talk on behalf of other people? So without talking to the data subjects, without understanding your audience and building for them, you know, we're on a path to failure.
Absolutely. And I love the comments. I love the questions. Keep them coming. Ralph, excellent answers and very engaging conversation. We have roughly like 10 minutes until the end of our webinar. So maybe, Ralph, you can say what has been the question I haven't asked so far, but is relevant to the conversation.
I can think of plenty of irrelevant ones. That's just the way my brain works as soon as you say that. But no, certainly relevant to the conversation is, you know, we've talked about the cultural aspects, we've talked about the management aspects, we've talked about how we sort of move the needle, I think we have to start with ourselves. We kind of said that. How do we? It's got to start with ourselves. We have been traditionally seen as one way within an organization, and we've got to move that needle, or else we become these compliance paperwork pushers. So I think if I was going to talk to any like young or beginning data protection professionals who are just coming into the industry, I'd say, be the solution, not the problem. Yeah, be the solution, not the problem. Don't be the barrier. Don't be the blocker. Think about how you're going to assist and add value to the organization. Perhaps be a little bit less legal and a little bit more technical.
Be human.
And yeah, a little bit less legal, a little bit more technical, and yeah, put the humans at the center of what you do. Which is difficult because the organization might have different incentives. But I personally believe if we treat the humans right, the business stuff will follow. The profits will follow. Yes, that might mean more work up front, which is where the problem lies, because people, want to get to the end quicker. Yeah, it's just that, and I'm actually starting to get a little bit belligerent. When a client comes to me now and says, "Can you do a DPA for me, Ralph?" And I'm like, "Yeah, happy to help." And they're like, "Great, this is a system that we've had for 6 months." They're, "Right, I'll stop you there." And they'll say, "Why?" And I'll say, "Well, it's too late." "What? What's the point of doing DPA now?" I said, "If I do the DPA, what are you going to do and change?" And they say, "Well, not a lot. It's already in there and it's run by a vendor and we actually don't have the ability to change it." I'm like, "Right, great. Why are you doing one then?" I mean, it's great you want to pay me to do something that's going to sit on the shelf, but why are we doing it in the first place if you're not going to do anything with it? You came to me too late, or you don't have the ability to make the alteration. Perhaps we should have engaged with a product vendor and done the DPIA with them rather than the DPIA for you who's going to be using it. Because the ability to design in those features are going to be pretty important. And if you haven't got the capability to change that, or change the product, or even say no, we're not going to do this, what's the point of doing the DPIA in the first place? So yeah, Lauren's just written tick box exercise versus value add, and I think that's where we've kind of ended up. And I don't wish to draw a dark picture, but I think a lot of organizations will see their data protection people as the box that needs to be ticked, the evidence they need to produce so that a regulator won't have a problem. Whereas I think we could be using our time and efforts in a better way. And that means, as I said, changing conversations. It means changing culture, which are the difficult things. It means defying human nature, which is an even worse thing to do. Battling those corporate incentives, those perverse incentives, which are difficult things to do. But I think somehow, and it probably is going to need something awful to happen. And I hate to say this, but until organizations suffer the pain, I think we're in a vicious cycle here. The only people that can start to make those small incremental changes is by starting with ourselves.
Absolutely. One interesting situation is also, let's say that the in-house DPO Privacy Council has been saying the right things and what needs to be done, and the inclusions, trainings, the real impact. But the management doesn't believe or start to move to this needle. But they say like, okay, let's get an outside counsel who would give us like different advice. So the new people externally will come in and say the same things as the DPO has been saying, and it's like, okay, like what's the point? Like, why haven't we like done these things before? But why do you need someone externally to come and say the same things, and how to address these situations? Because it is very frustrating for the in-house person as well.
Yeah, I totally hear what you're saying. I mean, working across the globe, I've seen the same thing everywhere. As a consultant, as an external consultant, which I often am, you can be accused of the old expression is taking somebody's watch and telling them the time. I'm going to take your watch and tell you the time. Well, all you do is you come in, talk to my people, write it down and present it back to me. And I think that's weird because yes, sometimes that's what I do. I listen to the people inside the organization and present it back to the management. I think the reason the management take more heed of an external voice is Number one, they're paid money for it, therefore they perceive value in it. And number two, it's free of the politics. Therefore, they think, oh, it's not just somebody empire building. It's not somebody who owes me. I've often said that organizations pay me for my independence. Organizations pay me so that I can give them a view that's unbiased, that comes
But
from.
is it actually, if you're paying for it, what kind of view do you get?
Yeah, I mean, you have to have a view that is independent, and you're not worried about the consequence. Like internally, well, if I speak out too much, I'll get fired. And so I think externally, also as an external provider, you get to see lots of different companies, so you can say, well, what do they do? What do they do? What do they do? And so whenever I'm writing externally, or whenever I come in externally, I do ask those questions. Yes, I can do the DPIA for you, but how does that move the needle? Someone says, "Oh, do a GDPR audit." Okay, well, I'm going to do an audit and I'm going to tell you where the gaps are. But often I say, actually, you've got a deeper problem here. It's not about GDPR. It's about wider data management. It's about the way you look at things more culturally. They're harder questions to answer for organizations. But if an organization moves down that road, and actually, rather than just deal with the morass of information they've got here, there, and everywhere, take a more fundamental cultural approach, the rewards are great. It sounds like I painted a dark picture in the last 10 minutes, but actually, I do think, if we can change those conversations, get things to it properly, we can build great stuff that really helps humans and can earn us money. And that's great.
And one thing that Lauren is also mentioning, what if the regulator is saying out loud that we are doing these fact-finding exercises, we're doing spot audits, how to verbalize this to the management so we would get ahead before these audits come in, to find this narrative and timing suitable to get things done, how to verbalize it to the management.
If you're doing it because you fear the regulator, you're doing it for the wrong reasons to begin with. I don't need a hypothetical sword of Damocles over my head to tell me to be a good person. If I'm doing it because of fear of being found out, because of fear of being caught, you probably need to look in a mirror. Yes, I agree it's got a role to play, but some organizations look at regulatory penalty as a cost of doing business. Well, fine, I'll pay the fine. Right? So if you're in one of those organizations, the question might not be a legal one, it might be an ethical one.
Yeah. Final questions from the audience as well. So waiting for these, and the one thing I always love to ask from the speakers is, what would be the one thing you would like the audience to take from this conversation?
I think there's a wonderful meme. It's one of those really horrible memes. Is be the change you want to see, when you get them writing.
Very inspirational.
Yeah. Those sort of inspirational quotes. Nobody can change it but us, right? Nobody's going to care as much as we do. Nobody is going to be as passionate about this as we are or can be. So we've got to be inspirational. We've got to find new ways to change the needle. And I was talking to you beforehand about this board game I'm creating because I want to find a new way. How do we get into new audiences? How do we, go back to the fundamentals, which is not how do we avoid a fine or a penalty by producing paperwork, but how do we protect people and build kick-ass awesome products while we do it.
Yeah, and I think that we are all doing this higher calling and breaking the stereotypes that data protection and privacy and the people in this field is that the field itself is boring and unsexy, and how to make it fun and engaging, and it's
we are warriors on the digital frontier fighting for people's fundamental rights and freedoms. Yeah. How is that boring?
It's win-win, but everyone wins it. The end users win it, clients win it, the company wins it, society wins it. It's like all this unused potential that we can shed a light on.
So use your time in the right way.
Yeah. So, Ralph, do you want to end with some final thoughts, and as we are
I
wrapping
mean,
up?
I pretty much does it. Yeah, use your time in the right way. You know, we can do better. We can get out there, and we can change hearts and minds, as they say. We can build kick-ass products that bring great amount of money to organizations, and also we can do it in a way that doesn't hurt people. And we can turn all those horrible documents that we're doing to tick the box into something that actually does something. So that's my challenge. Get out there and do it.
Absolutely. And Lauren has said it. Thank you for an interesting and entertaining, pragmatic discussion on data protection and humanistic responsibility. Well said from Lauren's side. So thank you, Ralph, for coming and talking into such a eye-opening and fun discussion, I would say. So, and we hope to have another webinar, or last webinar of the season. I hope in the beginning of June, before everyone runs off to their holidays to get some rest. And thank you for watching. The recording will be also available for the audience and others who didn't get to join today. Enjoy the rest of the week, and happy continuous spring to all of you. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.